I want to now connect to our panelists this evening. Joining me, Sudhindra Kulkarni. I have Mr. A.L. Banerjee, former DGP UP, and I have Feroz Muthi Barawala, National Convener, Indian Muslims for Secular Democracy. Mr. Kulkarni, I'd like to begin with you, and there are many multiple questions that are coming to light right now. That first, yes, one thing is very clear. These protests were coordinated. One can't deny that. They happened one after the other in each cities. On the other hand, many places in these cities, it went violent. There was arson involved. There's no place for a violent protest. There is no place for arsonists in India. But the bigger question also beckons, Sudhindra Kulkarni, that clearly these protests that are happening 2 weeks after what was said by Nupur Sharma in a debate, asking right now, the arrest for Nupur Sharma also seems to suggest that the Muslims are fairly alienated, that they have decided to protest, even if it is in a coordinated manner and organized manner, after the international community put pressure, international Islamic countries put pressure, where it does seem that Muslims in India now identify with the larger identity of being Muslim than Indians.
Let's first understand that the anger in a large section of the Indian Muslim community is understandable. They have a right to protest. They also have a reason to protest. But they have a duty to protest, in the sense, duty in protesting peacefully and lawfully. Therefore, incidents of violence must be condemned, and those who organize these protests must know that violence brings disrepute to the protests. It defeats the purpose of the protests. It is not in the interest of India. It's not even in the interest of the Muslim community itself. So therefore, anything that is done in the name of protest to incite violence is something that must be condemned, and the state has then a duty to crack down. I hope that in future such things are avoided. At the same time, we must know that countries around the world, Muslim countries around the world, should not interfere in our affairs. But for this to happen, the government has a duty to ensure that the Muslim community is treated fairly and with justice, which is not the case. And therefore, the government has given a chance for the countries around the world, Muslim countries, to condemn what happened.
Right.
And therefore, instead of just saying that the international community is putting pressure on India, we should introspect. Why has this situation come into being in the first place? The Nupur Sharma episode should not be seen in isolation. A series of incidents where Muslims were ill-treated, Muslims were targeted, they were victims of targeted violence, both by the police as well as by Hindu communal forces, and the government was indirectly encouraging this. And therefore, I hold the government responsible for whatever has happened, and the government must now take the corrective action.
You know, I want to connect right now to Mr. Mithi Borwala, and the question I want to ask you, sir, is taking off from what Mr. Sudhindra Kulkarni said. The fact is, yes, the interference of international Islamic states is condemnable, but is there a sense now where the protests that we saw today, you know, we're going to get to the point that they turned violent, that there was arson involved, which has no place in Indian democracy. We'll get to that point. But the fact that these protests happened after Islamic nations across the world condemned it with what went down, and the government was compelled to take action, that the Muslims in this country are now identifying with the larger identity of being Muslims and identifying with these nations instead of their core identity of what we'd hope that they would, which is being Indian.
No, I don't think that's true. Indian Muslims clearly identify as Indians. And in fact, let me tell you about the hypocrisy of these so-called Gulf Islamic nations. For them, it is, they have come out when there has been an insult to the Prophet Muhammad.
True.
But where were these Gulf nations when Muslims are being lynched, calls for social economic boycott, calls for genocide from the Dharam Sansad? there was no Gulf nation or Islamic nation ever talking about it. They don't really care. These same Gulf nations don't care for Palestine. The Saudis are involved in the greatest genocide in Yemen right now.
Or the Uyghurs in China.
Yeah, no, that's a different question. I don't agree on that point. I don't think the Chinese are indulging in that, but that's a different issue.
Right.
But the point is that as far as the Gulf nations are concerned, we have the sorry state of the Taliban giving us teachings on multi-religious societies. But let's also understand what Sudhindra Kulkarni is saying out here, that the government of India has brought this disrepute upon India. We are now answering countries like Qatar and Pakistan and UAE and the others who don't have this understanding of universal or don't base themselves on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. These are all Islamic states. The Hifazatul Islam of Bangladesh is giving us lessons on secularism. But this is what Hindutva has done to this country, and especially in the last 3 years, where we've actually come down to this level of these Islamic countries. Now also I'm saying that today's protest, yes, Muslims are too scared to protest actually. I mean, the way things are, I'm surprised to see protests in Uttar Pradesh, and they've turned violent. The point is, yes, you can protest, but no violence is very clear. This is a country of Mahatma Gandhi and of Maulana Azad and of Baba Ambedkar. You have every right to protest, but this is no way to target the police and to stone throwing and all that. Okay. The other thing I'd like to say is that actually human rights is not an internal matter anymore. Human rights is a universal value. I have a right to speak out against the blacks being targeted in America. I have a right to speak out against the minorities being targeted in Pakistan. I have a right to speak out against the Palestinians being targeted by the Israelis. I have a right to speak out, and so do other countries. I mean, the United States, for all its evil, but they do come out with an international report, the Commission of Religious Rights. That report is very, very important. So our own friendly allies are seeing how India is descending into a mobocracy.
Right.
And yeah, so that's the point. But I think I think what really is required right now is for the Prime Minister to speak out to call for an end to this.
That's a fair point, and that's what we're coming, to. But I want to bring in Mr. A.L. Banerjee, former DGP UP as well. Mr. Banerjee, the fact is the issue is so sensitive, and there's such a tightrope walk that the administration now needs to walk. Because yes, it's very clear where arson is involved, where violence is involved, that there's a heavy hand which comes down and stops it and action is taken. But on the other hand, how do you give that message of an outreach which clearly there are emotions which are running high and the outpouring we've seen in form of protests?
Surely. The first thing is that the administration has to sit with the leaders of the community and which is called peace committee meetings, and explain to them that we still remain what we are, a democracy, socialist country, etc. If this is not explained to them, they are getting the chance to speak. In fact, even indulging in mobocracy. But that this shouldn't happen anymore should also be told to them in very strict and specific terms. The extent and encompass of this violence surprises me. I didn't expect it to be happening in so many places in Uttar Pradesh and so many places outside Uttar Pradesh also.
But Mr. Banerjee, the fact that it is coordinated is very easy to see. The blueprint behind it, there was a message which went out on WhatsApp. This is coordinated. You can't deny that.
Yes, it is coordinated, and on this issue, the intelligence has been caught on a flat foot. Because if they knew that last Friday prayer resulted in the Kanpur clashes, things could again happen after the next Friday prayers. Were they prepared for that? I was listening to another channel on which it said that the violence there started in Prayagraj where the police was not present. It means that there were no duties put up there. They only subsequently, when the police came, were they in a position to control the mob. So this means that somebody is sleeping over this, somebody slept over this in a couple of places, but the other places they have coordinated it and coordinated in a damn in a manner which surprises me absolutely. You have pamphlets, you have leaflets, everything, and they have gone about doing it.
You know, Mr. Kulkarni, I'm going to take off from what Mr. Mitti Borwala also said. You know, the fact is that we're at the precipice of something clearly very sinister, very easy for everyone to see. Now, yes, there should be an outreach. Mr. Mithi Borwala said very clearly that it needs to come from the highest authority. I want to ask you, Mr. Kulkarni, at what level should this outreach take place, and what is the scope and the level of this outreach? How do you reach out to a community which A, feels alienated, is easily instigated, and is easily incensed by both the keepers of the faith and politicians?
No. First of all, I would like to say that your earlier remark that the Indian Muslims do not identify themselves with India, but they identify with the international Muslim community, this is not true at all. The Indian Muslims are as patriotic as non-Muslims.
No, but Mr. Kulkarni, it wasn't
let's not keep on questioning the patriotism.
So it wasn't a flat-out comment. It was, are we looking at that? Because we've come to a precipice where what we wanted was the identity to be an Indian, but we're alienating them, where the identity of a Muslim is overtaking the identity of India.
That's not true. They are protesting because they have a reason to protest. And they have a reason to protest, but because the government has abdicated its responsibility. There is a chain of events that has happened. This is not some isolated incident. Mithi Borwala himself listed some of those things. Every single incident, beginning with mob lynching, beginning with calls for genocide, the bulldozer incident, all these things have incensed, angered the Indian Muslim community. Now your question, who should do the outreach and at what level? Most certainly it is the responsibility of the Prime Minister and the Home Minister. And they have kept quiet so far. It is not enough for the party to take some action against its former spokesperson. Since the issue is now snowballing, the Prime Minister cannot keep quiet. The entire country wants this issue to come to an end peacefully. And therefore, the Prime Minister, the Home Minister and other political leaders, they must reach out to the leaders of the Muslim community, and of course they must be very clearly told that violence has no place in a democracy. At the same time, their genuine anger and alienation must be understood and addressed.
You know, I'll bring in Mr. Mithi Borwala back into this conversation. Sir, you know, one of the main reasons, possibly the genesis of this anger, which has been simmering, and clearly there are forces which keep stirring the pot, is the fact that it wasn't that there wasn't any protest, it wasn't that there wasn't any anger, once it was known what the spokesperson had said in a particular debate. But no action was taken for over 8 days. The action came when the Islamic states, Islamic nations stepped in. So is there a sense of alienation at that as well?
No, no, undoubtedly. The alienation goes prior to the Nupur Sharma incident. The alienation is stark. The insecurity is stark. The fear is stark. People don't tend to understand the level of fear within the Indian Muslim community, especially when they call for genocide. And I mean, where is the Home Minister and where is the Prime Minister? So the point is, what is really required, and I think people like Sudhindra Kulkarni and us, whether the Prime Minister speaks out or not is a different issue now. I think as members of civil society, we need to have peace meetings in all of our cities. We need to have an organized peace effort in all our cities of not only meetings with Muslims, but meetings of various communities, all communities coming together. And so that we, next Friday, and I think we need to prepare for next Friday. If our senior most police inspector is saying that at Prayagraj there were no police after a protest in Kanpur flared up last Friday, then what on earth is going on? So the point is, I know, I mean, in Bombay we had peace, in Delhi we had peace. In fact, the Imam of Bukhari of Jama Masjid said, I didn't know who called for that, you know, the slogans that happened over there. So I do not really think this was an organized protest. Fridays are a day of gathering, and then things tend to get, you know, they just go along
Mr. Mithi Borwala, there was a WhatsApp message that went out. You know, it would be a little foolhardy to say that it wasn't organized, because city after city erupted practically at the same time. No, I don't know about that message, but the point is, all it takes is to gather in the masjid at 1:30 in the afternoon, and then you walk out of the masjid and you're walking out in a procession. So I really do not think this is a coordinated effort, because most of the protests have been peaceful. The one in Navi Mumbai was peaceful. Most of the protests have been peaceful. These three are broken out. It is a sign of great worry for this country. Yes.
And the only thing is, let the Muslims know that by protesting in this manner, you are insulting the memory of the Prophet and insulting Islam. And this is not what India is about or the Constitution is about. So totally abjure from violence. And the point is, next Friday, even if you want to protest, it is fine. But it has to be peaceful. And the other point I would like to say is, I think it is now up to secular activists who need to reach out to all the communities and bring about this dialogue and this call for peace. In fact, today I got a call from Tushar Gandhiji, the great grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. We are heading, and I think with Sudhindra Kulkarni here in Bombay as well, we will start this process on Monday itself by calling for peace meetings in our city to ensure that none of these things happen in Bombay or in any part of the country.
Right. You know, Mr. Mithi Borwala, I just want to also put on record that there was a WhatsApp message that was circulated, and it was circulated widely, asking for people to gather and protest.
Fair enough.
But, you know, I just want to put that on record because that's what had happened in terms of the coordination of these protests. But I want to, you know, go back to Mr. A.L. Banerjee, the former DGP UP, who's joining us. And Mr. Banerjee, the fact is, because there is so much distrust in the administration, in the system, sadly in policing as well, where this one community comes into question. Now, how do you deal a hand which seems to suggest that you're coming down on the miscreants, yet the administration is impartial in the rule of law?
It is very easy. When it is always said that justice should not only be done, but it should seem to have been done. If you make arrests outright, if you take up people who are really involved, I don't think any community, any person or any people are going to call it that it has been one-sided affair. So the police can really, in these kinds of things, show that we are even-handed.
Mr. Sudhindra Kulkarni, is this possibly the hour of reckoning for our politicians are concerned? Because when you talk about politics, it's they and the politicians and the netas who stir this communal pot in whichever way it suits them. You know, even when you talk about, the incumbent government, schemes are for everyone. There's Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, yet there is a community which feels alienated and discriminated against.
You're right. It is truly an hour of reckoning for the political establishment and for all governments, central, state governments. Never in India's history, independent history I mean, have our Muslim brethren felt so insecure as they do now. There were terrible riots at the time of partition, India's independence. But fortunately, we had leaders like Mahatma Gandhi, like Nehru, in whom Indian Muslims reposed their trust, and very soon the trauma of partition was put behind, and there was a sense of harmony created. Unfortunately, in the last 8 years, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, nobody believes that it is being followed. It is just a slogan. It has no meaning whatsoever. A whole community is isolated, disempowered. Take, for example, the fact that today, in the entire parliament, the BJP has 301 members in the Lok Sabha, but not a single Muslim MP. What does it mean? It gives a message to the Muslim community that the ruling party does not care for them. It does not want them. There is simply no outreach of any kind on the part of the Prime Minister, the Home Minister. So this anger is building up. This alienation is building up. And Nupur Sharma incident has it's been a crescendo.
Mr. Mithi Borwala, this anger which is building up, it's simmering, for so long, is also exploited by rogue elements within the community as well. I'm sure you'd agree. Now, the latest, the All India Muslim Law Board has gone ahead and, it's welcome that they are doing it, because that kind of responsibility needs to be taken from both sides of the community, where they have gone ahead and said and asked scholars and Maulvis not to enter debates and give out these statements, which can instigate and incense.
True. In fact, Preeti, I'm glad, because the media has a major role to play to douse the flames, and you've been very responsible in the question that you asked and the way you conducted the debate. So thank you for that.
Well, sir, thank you. I take it as a badge of honor.
Yeah, because media has been a great spoiler in the last 8 years. It has destroyed the social fabric of this country. I stopped going to most of these rogue channels. We have rogue Maulvis, we have rogue channels also. So the point is that, yes, in fact, there's a call from within the Muslim community to boycott those kind of Muslims like Sharafuddin and some horrors like him and other Maulvis who are paid to just spread hate hatred between the two communities. And they're so communal in the mindset and so regressive in their attitude that it is going to carry on to build the Hindu vote bank that the BJP wants. The other thing I'd like to tell your viewers is that the world is now watching India. The world has been watching India for some time because the call for a Muslim genocide actually is being discussed the world over. That India could be the country where a Rwanda kind of situation could occur. So the world is watching. Statements are coming from United States, from Europe, even the Arab and Islamic countries now. And I think it's up to the Indian people, Indian civil society, the Indian media, the Indian political leadership. I think it's time for Modi ji to actually call a meeting, an all-party meeting, and to give a message of unity from all the political parties. It's really necessary right now because we are collapsing as a society, and it's very, very worrying and very, very scary. I know my childhood Hindu friends who call me and how worried they are, but they've lost connection to Muslim friends. It's very sad to say. So it's a scary situation, a worrying situation, but I have faith in the country of Gandhi and Buddha that we have the tradition of pluralism, an ancient tradition of acceptance and mutual respect on which we can build back our country. We've lost 8 years. It's not that we didn't have communal problem before Modi got along. But after Modi's come to power, it is a different, new India, a dangerous India in which we are living with.
I want to take this question to Mr. Kulkarni because, Mr. Kulkarni, the fact that what Mr. Mithi Borwala also said, that like-minded activists, people should get together and start, initiating a peace dialogue of sorts. But it's been happening. It's not that it hasn't happened. Do you also believe now the solution is more political? We require an party meet. We need people from the mainstream to come and possibly, stop stirring the communal pot and take the dialogue in a direction which is more tangible and conducive?
I entirely endorse and support the idea that the Prime Minister should call an all-party meeting on how to bring peace, harmony, and mutual understanding in society. And the government, of course, has the highest responsibility, but all political parties have a responsibility. But beyond the political establishment, the people of India, the civil society, all the cultural, religious institutions, they all should become active now, because peace is a common need for the entire country. We can't possibly see the situation snowballing into massive riots of the kind that happened in Gujarat, of the kind that happened even before the BJP came to power in several parts of the country. This country should not see the repeat of such riots. And therefore, it's a common responsibility of the political establishment, the government, and civil society. And I must underline the responsibility of the media. Your channel is an exception, an honorable exception, but we know the kind of poison that is being spewed by many English channels, your own Hindi channel, many other Hindi channels and regional language channels. They are doing nothing but spreading hate propaganda and poisonous propaganda. And they must be stopped in the first place. I would say the government, the Prime Minister, must take very strong action against the media and not create any such situation whereby, once again, the Gulf countries, Arab countries, and other Muslim countries and other countries in the world begin to comment on happenings in India.
Well, I think one thing I can safely say is that the India Today group always endeavors and does sidestep
India Today group. India Today, your channel, not your Hindi channel.
No, sir. I take offense to that. I really do take offense to that. I'm a part of the India Today group, and I can safely say that we sidestep the dribble. We report objectively and we present objectively. And I would really hope you understand that. I want to end the debate, and I want to bring in Mr. Banerjee once. Mr. Banerjee, the fact is, the role of the politicians aside, but the role of those who actually give out the rule of law. The administration is going to be important, because we've seen in the past there are various conspiracy theories and angles that are always looked into. In terms of when we saw the Kanpur riots emerge, there was the PFI angle, then there was various other, random conspiracy theories that are floated, which really don't come down to anything eventually. I want to ask you, from here on, how does the law take its course in true letter and spirit?
The law should be applied as it is. Prima facie, to imagine that if the PFI link has been brought up in Kanpur, that is a wrong sign, or that should not have happened, is not there. In fact, I personally know the officers in Kanpur, and
Right.
they wouldn't cook up a story. Very few people would like to cook up a story because it will not go on trial immediately, maybe go on trial subsequently, and create a permanent scar. So the point is that the state police, in this particular case, state
Right.
police forces, various states, West Bengal, Jharkhand, Uttar Pradesh, etc., have to be very careful as to what they are doing with the information that is coming in, and use that information to stop further.
Right,
They have
sir.
to desensitize the people.
Well, let's just end at that. Let's give peace a chance. Protest in a democracy is welcome. Protest which teeter on the fine lines of violence or arson is not. Time to give peace a chance. I appreciate all three of you gentlemen for taking the time out and joining us this evening. And I do want to end this debate with this one blanket statement. At least the India Today group, in its entirety on all its platform, endeavors and does bring you the news responsibly and objectively.